House That Waits. Part 1. The Arrival. The road was empty when Eliza finally reached the edge of Hollow Pines. She had driven for hours, following the winding country lanes, guided only by the directions left in her grandmother's will. The old estate had been abandoned for decades, its existence a whispered family secret. But now it belonged to her. The trees seemed to lean closer as she drove, their branches arching over the road like skeletal arms. The air grew heavier, colder, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. When the house came into view, Eliza's stomach tightened. It was massive, Victorian in style, its peaked roof and narrow windows watching her approach. Vines crawled up the stone walls, and the iron gates sagged on rusted hinges. For a moment, she considered turning back, but curiosity and the weight of inheritance urged her forward. The gravel crunched beneath her tires as she pulled into the overgrown drive. The house loomed above her, silent and patient, as if it had been waiting all this time. She stepped out, her boots sinking into damp earth, the faint scent of rot lingering in the air. The front door was larger than she expected, its wood scarred with deep scratches that looked too deliberate to be the work of weather. Inside, the house smelled of dust and mildew. The silence was thick, broken only by the faint creak of floorboards beneath her weight. Eliza clicked on her flashlight and swept it across the foyer. A grand staircase spiraled upward into shadows, while doorways on either side led into vast, unlit rooms. The air was colder here, unnaturally so, and she pulled her coat tighter around her. She could almost feel the house watching her, listening, waiting. She whispered to herself, "It's just a house, just wood and stone," but her voice sounded hollow, swallowed by the cavernous halls. She explored cautiously, her footsteps echoing. In the dining room, the long oak table was still set with tarnished silverware, as though waiting for a meal that never came. Cobwebs draped the chandelier like funeral veils. In the library, books lay scattered across the floor, their spines broken, their pages yellowed and crumbling. Yet one book rested neatly on a lectern, untouched by dust. She leaned closer, but the letters on the spine were faded, unreadable. When she touched it, the whispering began. It was faint at first, like wind through cracks, but it grew clearer voices overlapping, whispering in tones too low to understand. Eliza spun around, her flashlight beam darting across the shelves. Nothing moved. The air, however, was colder still, and the whispers seemed to seep into her skin. She stepped back, bumping into the lectern. The book fell open with a thud. The page inside was blank, except for one sentence scrawled in fresh ink. "Welcome home, Eliza." Her heart lurched. She staggered back, the flashlight trembling in her grip. The words stared at her, sharp and deliberate, though the ink glistened as though freshly written. She slammed the book shut and stumbled into the hallway. The house groaned around her, floorboards shifting, walls creaking as if adjusting to her presence. She froze, listening. For a moment, the whispers stopped. Then, from upstairs, came the slow, deliberate sound of footsteps. One step, another, pausing, waiting. Eliza's throat tightened. She forced herself toward the stairs, each creak beneath her feet sounding like a warning. At the landing, she hesitated, the silence pressing down on her like a weight. The hallway stretched into darkness, lined with doors. Every one of them was closed. Everyone seemed to be listening. At the end of the hall, one door stood slightly ajar. A thin line of pale light spilled out, unnatural and cold. The whispers returned, louder now, rising in a low chorus. Eliza's hand hovered near the doorframe. The air was icy, prickling her skin. Slowly, she pushed the door open. The room was empty, except for a chair in the center. On it sat a small wooden box, carved with symbols she didn't recognize. The light seemed to emanate from the box itself, pale and unnatural, filling the air with a faint vibration, like a heartbeat. And then the door slammed shut behind her. Part 2, the first night. The slam of the door echoed through the room, so sharp and final that Eliza dropped her flashlight. The beam rolled across the floor, slicing through the gloom, before coming to rest against the wooden box on the chair. Her breath caught in her throat. She lunged back toward the door, tugging at the handle with both hands. It rattled in its frame, but did not budge. It was locked, or worse, it was being held shut from the other side. The whispers rose again, clearer now, though still just beyond understanding. They seemed to spiral around the room, circling her, threading through the air like smoke. Eliza pressed her back against the wall, staring at the chair. The box's pale glow pulsed faintly, like the rise and fall of lungs. She didn't want to touch it. Every part of her body screamed to leave it alone. But the oppressive weight of the whispers pulled her forward, as though the house itself was urging her. Her feet moved slowly across the warped floorboards, the flashlight beam quivering with each step. The box was old, carved from dark wood, its edges smoothed by countless years. Strange symbols covered its surface, swirling and curling in patterns that seemed to writhe when viewed too long. She reached out, her hand trembling, and brushed her fingers across the lid. The whispers stopped. The silence was sudden, heavy, almost suffocating. Eliza froze, her breath the only sound in the room. Then, softly, from within the box, came the sound of breathing. Slow, measured, as though something inside was waiting. Her heart pounded in her chest. She jerked her hand back and stumbled away, knocking into the wall. The flashlight flickered, dimmed, then steadied. The box remained closed, its glow faint but persistent. The door creaked. Eliza whirled. It was open now, just a sliver, but enough to see the dark hallway beyond. She didn't hesitate. She snatched up her flashlight and bolted into the hall, slamming the door shut behind her. The house groaned again, deep and resonant, like a sigh of amusement. She fled down the stairs, her footsteps loud in the silence. In the foyer, she paused, chest heaving. She should leave, she thought. Walk back to her car, drive until the road ended. But something rooted her in place. The will had been clear. She owned this house now. And something about it felt personal, as if the walls themselves recognized her. The whispers returned this time, from every direction. They slithered through the halls, threading through the cracks in the walls, seeping down from the ceiling. They formed no words, just a restless chorus, rising and falling in tones too soft to grasp. The night pressed in around her. Eliza found herself moving to the parlor, where heavy curtains blocked the moonlight. Dust lay thick across the furniture, but one armchair by the fireplace was curiously clean, its cushions plump, its fabric unstained, as though someone had been sitting there only moments ago. She refused to sit. Instead, she crouched by the fireplace, using her phone to check the time. Midnight. Her phone showed no signal, not even the faintest bar of service. The battery was draining faster than usual, the percentage slipping downward as if something unseen was feeding on it. When she glanced up, the chair was no longer empty. Her breath froze in her chest. A shadow sat there now, indistinct, shifting at the edges, as though it were smoke trying to hold a human shape. It leaned forward, though its face was only darkness, its presence heavy and undeniable. Eliza scrambled back, her flashlight beam cutting across the chair. The shadow vanished. The chair was empty once more. She clutched the flashlight to her chest, trembling. Sleep was impossible. Still, her body ached with exhaustion. She wandered the halls restlessly, unable to find peace, until she reached a smaller room near the back of the house. It looked like a child's bedroom, tiny bed, peeling wallpaper with faded patterns of stars, and a wardrobe leaning precariously against the wall. The bed was made. The wardrobe was closed. For some reason, the room felt safer. She shut the door, set her flashlight on the floor, and curled onto the bed fully dressed. Her eyes burned with fatigue, and despite her fear, her body began to relax. But just as sleep began to pull her under, she heard it. A faint sound, a creak of wood. Slowly, painfully, she turned her head toward the wardrobe. Its door was open now, just an inch, but enough to see darkness inside. From within came the softest of whispers, this time unmistakable. Stay. Part 3. The heart of the house. Eliza did not sleep. She lay rigid on the narrow bed, her eyes locked on the wardrobe door. The whisper still clung to the air, faint and curling like smoke. Her flashlight flickered weakly from the floor, its beam cutting a pale path across the peeling wallpaper. Every instinct screamed for her to run, to leave this room, this house, this place that should never have been hers. But she could not move. It was as though the whisper had threaded into her muscles, rooting her in place. The silence pressed in around her, heavy and suffocating. The wardrobe door creaked again, opening wider, just enough to suggest that something unseen was watching her from within. Finally, she broke free of her paralysis. She lunged from the bed, grabbing her flashlight in one shaking hand and yanking the door open with the other. The hallway beyond was dark, colder than the room she left, and smelled faintly of damp earth. She didn't look back. She didn't want to. Her footsteps echoed as she fled down the corridor, every creak of the old floorboards sounding like something following close behind. When she reached the grand staircase, she paused, her chest tight, her breath shallow. The house was awake. She could feel it. The walls seemed to pulse faintly, as though the entire structure had a heartbeat. The whispers threaded through the air again, low and steady, guiding her, pulling her forward. And for reasons she couldn't explain, she obeyed. The whispers led her down the staircase, past the locked front door that no longer seemed to have a keyhole, past the parlor where the empty chair sat waiting. They drew her deeper, through a narrow passage near the kitchen, where the air grew colder with each step. The passage ended at another door. Unlike the others in the house, this one was heavy, reinforced with iron bands. The handle was ice cold beneath her fingers. She hesitated only a moment before pushing it open. A staircase descended into darkness. The smell of damp stone and old earth rose to meet her. She aimed her flashlight down the steps, the beam catching walls lined with brick and glistening with moisture. Somewhere below, water dripped in a slow, steady rhythm. Her skin prickled as she descended. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the air itself was pressing down on her. The whispers grew louder, layering over one another until they formed a steady hum. At the bottom, she found herself in a wide chamber. The walls curved like a hollowed-out cavern, roots breaking through the stone to hang from the ceiling. In the center of the floor stood a pedestal of black marble, and on it another box. This one was larger than the one she had seen upstairs. Its carvings were deeper, sharper, and they seemed to shift under the flashlight beam. The air around it vibrated faintly, thrumming against her skin. The whisper stopped. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. Eliza's heart thudded in her chest. She felt drawn to the box, compelled to approach. Each step forward felt like stepping into water, slow and dragging. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and brushed against the lid. A shock jolted through her, not painful, but overwhelming. A rush of cold that filled her lungs. The whispers surged back, but now they were words, clear and unmistakable. We waited. Eliza staggered back, her flashlight beam jerking wildly. The chamber seemed to ripple around her, shadows bending and stretching, roots shifting as though alive. The box pulsed with light, each throb syncing with the beat of her heart. She wanted to run, but the whispers held her still. Blood remembers. The house is yours. The house is you. Her Her breath came in sharp gasps. She shook her head, backing away toward the stairs. But the chamber had changed. The steps she had descended were gone. In their place was only a wall of stone, damp and unyielding. The whispers rose again, louder now, echoing through her skull. She clutched her head, dropping the flashlight. It spun across the floor, its beam illuminating the walls. Faces. The bricks were etched with faces, hundreds of them. Mouths open in silent screams, eyes wide with horror. Some were so lifelike that she swore they blinked, their expressions shifting ever so slightly as the light passed over them. The box pulsed once more, brighter now, casting long shadows that stretched toward her like reaching hands. Eliza screamed. The sound was swallowed by the chamber, absorbed into the stone, as though the walls themselves drank it in. The faces on the walls seemed to quiver in response, their mouths stretching wider, their eyes rolling toward her. The whispers fell silent, and in that silence, from the shadows behind her, came a new sound. Footsteps, slow, heavy, coming closer. Part 4, the final night. The footsteps echoed through the chamber, deliberate and unhurried. Each one reverberated off the damp stone walls, mingling with the faint dripping of water. Eliza pressed herself against the wall, her hands trembling, her heart thundering in her chest. The beam of her fallen flashlight flickered across the floor. Shadows shifted with the approaching steps, though nothing yet entered the circle of light. She wanted to scream, to run, to fight, but her body refused to obey. She was caught in the house's grip now, a fly trembling in the web. The footsteps stopped. Silence pressed in, suffocating and absolute. Eliza's breath came in ragged gasps. She lowered her eyes to the box, its glow steady, pulsing faintly like the beat of a heart. And then a voice spoke. Not a whisper, not the chorus she had been hearing all night, but a single voice, low, resonant, impossibly close. Open it. Eliza shook her head, her lips trembling. No, she managed to whisper, though her voice sounded thin, swallowed by the chamber. The voice came again, closer this time, curling against her ear. Open it or stay. The faces on the walls shifted, their eyes wide and pleading, their mouths frozen in silent cries. For the first time, she understood they were not carvings. They were remnants, those who had come before. She staggered forward, her body no longer fully her own. Her hands hovered over the box, fingers trembling. The wood was cold, almost icy, the carvings pressing sharply into her skin. When she lifted the lid, the chamber erupted. The whispers screamed as one, a chorus of anguish and hunger. The light burst upward, flooding the room with blinding brilliance. The faces on the walls writhed and contorted, their mouths stretching wide as the glow poured into them. Eliza cried out, shielding her eyes. The cold rushed through her veins, filling every corner of her body. Her skin prickled, her bones ached, her heart raced until she thought it would burst. And then silence. The light dimmed, the whisper ceased. Eliza stood alone in the chamber. The box was gone. The pedestal was bare. She turned slowly, her breath ragged. The staircase had returned, winding upward into darkness. Her flashlight lay where it had fallen, its beam now steady, waiting for her. She picked it up with shaking hands and climbed. Each step echoed hollowly, as though she were the only living thing left in the house. When she emerged into the foyer, the air was warmer. The silence was no longer oppressive, but still watchful. The house seemed calmer now, its hunger sated, its whispers dormant. Eliza staggered to the front door. The handle turned easily beneath her hand. She pulled it open, and dawn's pale light spilled across the threshold. She stepped outside, the chill morning air filling her lungs. The birds were singing faintly in the distance, as though nothing had happened, as though the house behind her was only wood and stone. But when she turned back, she saw the truth. The house seemed smaller, quieter, almost ordinary. Yet in the highest window, a shadow moved. A figure, indistinct but familiar, stood watching her. Her reflection, the realization, settled like ice in her stomach. She had not left the house at all. The house had claimed her, woven her into its endless walls, just as it had claimed the faces in the stone. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and inside, the house waited. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe for more stories to fall asleep to.